Amazing. Live and at home. So we will kick off this meeting of the Strategic Planning Committee, this extra meeting that we added. I'm going to ask the clerk, ask Beth to take the roll to start the meeting.
Trustee Kane,
I'm here.
Trustee Riley,
I am too.
Trustee Alexander,
Hello.
Trustee Cates,
Here.
Trustee Moore.
Yes.
I believe that's everyone.
Great. Thank you so much, Beth. I really
Emily,
appreciate it.
I am a little concerned. You have a lawyer and Amy. You're really, you've got
Who,
the.
me? I mean, look, half these people are my neighbors. It's super great. It's like we're having a block party right here at the Strategic Planning Committee meeting. And had better for it. So we are meeting today. I'm gonna just remind people to please leave your mics muted when you're not speaking. It's a reminder I need also myself at times, including this week on some of the committee meetings. And I will say this meeting is scheduled for 2 hours. It may not take the full 2 hours, but we scheduled it that way because we wanted to make sure we had time for robust discussion if we needed it and didn't want to rush people through because so much of the meeting today is about conversation and context and getting some guidance from this committee, and everyone's here. And I'm really happy to see we have faculty here as well as leadership from the system and the universities. So thank you so much. As of right about now, or sort of in December, we are officially halfway through our strategic plan implementation. That is what's sort of driving this look or relook at the strategic plan, because this is a perfect time to check in on the factors that have impacted and continue to impact our plan and our ability to implement it fully. We're going to talk about those factors today, but we are in good company. Recently, the state of Maine updated their 10-year economic development plan at the 5-year mark. So I think we are in good company to sort of take stock, particularly over the last 2.5 years where so much has changed so rapidly. This meeting is designed to be in 3 parts. First, we're going to do a quick progress report. Because at our meeting this summer, we did a full comprehensive update on the status of the plan, we're not going to repeat that. We're going to spend a shorter amount of time on a progress report sort of since then at today's meeting. And Jeff and Carolyn have prepared some slides with other members of system leadership. That's going to be the first part of the meeting. The second part of the meeting, we are going to have a robust conversation about the factors that have impacted our plan. I have a starting list to go through with us, and we can have a bigger conversation about it. And then in the third part, we're going to spend time as a committee talking through and providing support and guidance to the leadership team on our preferences as we approach evaluating the plan for changes. So that is the plan for today's meeting. Are there any questions about that? That's what's outlined in the agenda, but just want to make sure we are all aligned as we enter into the work today. Excellent. Thank you. Well, with that, I will turn it over to Jeff and Carolyn to kick off the progress report. And I think others are part of that presentation as well.
Thank you, Trustee Kane. Heather, could you begin the screen share? And thank you. When Trustee Kane says Jeff and Carolyn prepared some slides, what that means in translation is Heather Ball prepared some slides and did a wonderful job putting together information that the Vice Chancellor's teams forwarded to us for this purpose. And again, in keeping with the introduction that Emily offered, that we'll be moving through this pretty quickly because it's meant to be an overview and not an in-depth portion of today's meeting. We can advance, Heather. So the thin rectangles toward the top are your indicators to what you're seeing in this slide and the following 2. So on the darkened rectangle, this is June 2025. This is where we were as of the last time the committee met, with the percentages of goals that we had tackled as of June of this year. And 65, 100 in Ryan's area, but there is no lingering resentment there from any of the other vice chancellors. 55% in Destination for Education and Work, 66% and 92% unified accreditation. And that's where we stood as of June. Next slide, please. So this slide and the following slide are both current state, October 2025. This slide is goals complete or complete and ongoing as of this month, October 2025. As you'll see in 3 of the 4 areas that were below 100%, we've made gains since June. And I will note in the 5th area, unified accreditation, we have one goal that can only be met through our submission of a scheduled report to NETCHI in 2027. So while we have the information we need to complete that goal, we literally can't complete it until our submission window reaches us per NETCHI practice. So for all intents and purposes, unified accreditation is also completed, but we will submit a report a year and a half from now, and that will top off that commitment 5 in the plan. And then next slide, Heather. So here, trustees, what you're seeing, and others, what you're seeing is all goals complete and ongoing and in progress across the plan. Accounting for the fact that there are a different number of goals under each of these headings, roughly speaking, well north of 85% of the plan at this point is complete and ongoing or in progress. There are only a very small number of goals that have not yet been initiated in some fashion. Again, at the 2.5-year mark, we are close to 90% completion of the plan as authorized by the board, and work began on the plan in May of 2023. So between then and now, that's where we stand in terms of overall progress. Next slide. We've shared a couple of highlights on the next 4 slides for the first 4 of the 5 commitments. We didn't share a commitment 5 slide because, as I just explained, commitment 5 has been completed with the exception of one goal that we'll be filing in a report in 2027. Here in commitment 1, which is one of the slides I'm responsible for, we offer a couple of examples of goals that we were given by the trustees in the plan. And here, because all 3 of these areas are very amenable to simple quantitative metrics, we've provided the baseline data for you. So we took as our starting point fall 2022, which is when we began work on the plan, and then census fall 2025. So you've got a perfect 3-year snapshot of work. And I will only make 2 points about this data because you can all read it for yourselves. Well, 3 points. The first is that you'll see we've made gains in every area across enrollment, retention, and transfer as reflected on this slide. The second point is that for the trustees' benefit, the retention figure, increasing system-wide retention 1.5 points, when the first 1.5 years of that period was under active COVID restriction, and when you're dealing with trying to move a percentage that crosses 20,000 undergraduates on 7 campuses. Just for context, 1.5 points gain over that period is significant, and we know we have individual universities that have made great strides. It's a testament to the chancellor and the presidents that they have focused quite resolutely on improving retention outcomes at their universities, and we've seen the fruit of that in toto in this figure. And then the last point I'll make here is that trustees are aware of some well-publicized challenges with our Maine community college system partners with respect to their student information system and the difficulty it's caused in trying to implement fully the Transfer Me agreement that the Chancellor and President Degler signed in July of 2024. Notwithstanding that and the stunted flow of students through that mechanism, we've continued to see growth in Maine community college transfers. We will see further growth this year as we continue with a workaround until such time as our Maine community college system partners are able to take full advantage of their implemented student information system and share the information needed for the Transfer Me agreement in the way we originally conceived. Next slide,
Jeff,
please.
Jeff, before you're still on commitment 1. I just want to make sure we pause at the end of commitment 1 to see if people have questions.
Certainly. Well, I'm happy to pause here if anyone has any questions about this slide.
If you do, you can speak up or use the raise hand function if you don't mind. Looks like you're good.
Next slide. Just a couple of examples from goals around adult degree completion. And related goals in Commitment 1, trustees are well aware of the increased enrollment in UMPE Your Pace, which now also includes the NECHI approved expansion of Your Pace to Fort Kent and Farmington beginning this fall semester. Trustees' approval of the 590 credit degree programs for adult degree completers. And those who were with us for ASA on Monday know that we are awaiting a November decision from NECHI on our request to deliver those 90 credit programs. And then also, those of you who were with us on Monday got an overview of credit for prior learning and the work that Heather and I are doing with the campus leads in that important area of student entry into our universities.
I think you're good, Jeff. I don't see
Okay,
any
thank
hands.
you. Next slide. This is a research-focused slide, so I would certainly invite Jason, Charlene, and Vice Chancellor Farini-Mundy to offer any thoughts they would like about this highlight.
Thank you, Jeff. I'll chime in, and Jason is here also. He's been doing a lot of the heavy lifting on keeping us focused on our actions and goals, as well as our relationship in the research domain to Commitment 1. And so this research action is about further establishing and investing, as you can see, in system-wide infrastructure to grow the R&D. And I would add, and innovation. I think that would be a change that's an important focus as well, enterprises at our university. And by infrastructure, I think we mean all the pieces of infrastructure: human capital, fiscal assets, as well as any capital activity in that area. And there's a lot that has been going on. And so we've listed some areas of evidence. Certainly, part of what's been important here is to understand system-wide the ways in which each of our individual universities and the law school can best engage in continuing to build new knowledge and to bring that knowledge into wide use through translation. So we've established a research leaders group. That group meets quarterly. They're working on another strategic plan requirement, which is an updated humane system R&D plan. But they bring to that the very particular interests and capabilities of their campus. And then we talk a lot about cross-university collaboration. And we hope to revise that plan in time to present it at the November board meeting to give a sense of how we're adjusting and attending to what the individual campus interests and needs are like. As you all are aware, I am leading, with help from many, many people, any system-wide response to the federal actions, including monitoring the ever-changing activity under the current presidential administration. And at the current moment now, also working to be sure campuses have appropriate support in being guided through the shutdown. And we have several committees in place. And that's a part of reacting in the moment, really, to circumstances that weren't planned for at the outset of this strategic plan. As a piece of this as well, we're focusing on communication and system-wide engagement. And Chancellor Malloy and I hosted a PI meeting of all of the people across the system who have federal grants and talked about their situations and the shutdown guidance. And then finally, stepping up efforts, and this began really at the beginning of the strategic plan, to be sure that we had access to all across the system who are interested in research, development, and innovation supports, to be able to access what's available here at the University of Maine in our Office of the Vice President for Research and the Dean of the Graduate School. So we've had some additional investment there, and really stepping up activity right now in looking for funding sources, both across the federal government as things change, as well as external to the federal government, private sources, to be sure that our faculty can continue their work in R&D and innovation. So very engaged in supporting this clear action of the strategic plan.
Thank you. Questions for the Vice Chancellor / President? I think we're good. Let's keep going.
I think this one explains.
We just had a whole
itself, but
meeting about this one earlier
happy
today.
to have Vice Chancellor Lowe. If his voice isn't gone, he's welcome to.
The next two slides we just finished up.
Yeah, let's roll through them 1, 2, and then we see if there's any more questions for Ryan.
Next slide, Heather. Thank you.
These are about our financial health. Roger did a great job with that meeting. We did just discuss all of this. So are there any other questions people have related to these items about either energy consumption or reducing energy consumption or financial stability?
No, and isn't it good that we now know what a chiller is?
You've got one on the next FFT agenda too, so.
I know a lot about those things. I'm happy to talk about them anytime. Let's keep moving. Great job, Brian.
So Jeff, I'm going to jump ahead of you just quickly on this one because as we were talking earlier this morning and reviewing these, I realized the next two really were supposed to be out of my area, but the examples we gave quite brilliantly and not even meaning to, I picked ones that are actually Jeff's work and Amy Parker. So I will turn this sort of over to you, Jeff, if that's okay, because I know you and your team did a lot on the You Will work and the next slide as well. But if Amy has anything more broad to add from the employee perspective, please do.
Thank you, Carolyn. So trustees, just quickly, we used some one-time 2024 Strategic Initiative Fund dollars allocated by the Chancellor and Ryan for two purposes that one of which is underway this year, the other one just concluded or partly concluded. We went out and found system-wide telehealth, teletherapy, crisis counseling vendor called You Will that is supporting each of our undergraduate institutions except Farmington, which elected not to sign on. At the other universities are all being supported by this telehealth resource this year, with the understanding that if they would like to continue beyond this academic year, they would need to move the cost onto their own budgets. I already know confidently that 2 and possibly up to 4 of our universities are intending to move forward with You Will beyond this year. And the others are currently using it as a resource supplementing counseling staff on the campuses. So it's returned to good benefit already. I need to credit Heather Ball, who has been really working closely with the student affairs officers and our You Will vendor contact to try to drive up student utilization rates, especially as we approached and got through midterms and are now reaching post-Thanksgiving crunch time where students really can experience quite a bit of anxiety and could use a resource like this. The other part of the money that we were allocated from the Chancellor, we used for 2 purposes. One is to bring in a nationally known speaker facilitator, Jill Bassett Cameron, who came to our system last week and delivered identical workshops, one at Orono and one at USM in Portland, on vicarious trauma. So for faculty and professional staff, how working in and around student mental health affects your own mental health and resources for dealing with both. Over 100 employees came in person to this event across the 2 sessions, and she garnered some extraordinarily positive feedback from attendees. Jill will be recording a webinar later this fall that will be released to all faculty and staff in January. So anyone who wasn't able to come in person or didn't want to come in person will have a comparable resource that they can use at their own leisure. And we continue to look for ways to support faculty and professional staff mental health, especially as it intersects with student mental health. But these are the 2 things we did with the dollars allocated a year ago summer. Chair Riley.
I see Trish. Go ahead.
This is interesting. I was struck that the top reasons for usage, and I assume they're in order, academic concerns comes first. And does that tell us anything about the shortcomings of the academic support system? One wouldn't think of an academic concern necessarily in this kind of therapy.
I thought they were in alphabetical order, but I could be wrong.
I can say, if this is helpful, Chair Riley, that academic performance is both a predicate and a trigger for other kinds of stress. So if you are having a good experience and want to stay on campus, but your grades are trending in the wrong direction, that can precipitate all kinds of other concerns about whether you're able to stay based on your academic standing. And if you are experiencing anxiety or depression generally or from other causes, it almost always has an effect on academic performance. So they're mutually influencing factors, and so we put them all on the slide for that reason.
Thank you. Trustee Cates, Roger.
Thanks. Jeff, I understand the You Will program funded by the system this past year. Campuses are going to have to take that on if they want to continue. What was the approximate overall cost of that to the system? Do you know off
It
the
was
top of your head?
$377,000, which is
Okay.
relatively inexpensive for a service of that kind. We got a lower rate because we came in as a system than we would have gotten if the campuses had signed up individually for something of this nature.
Okay, so then again, they'll have to build these into their individual budgets if they want to continue.
Yes, and for context, two of the universities, Maine Law and Fort Kent, were already using UWill and were part of the reason why we looked at them as a system-wide vendor. And we've seen a range of usage rates so far across the system, but again, the lower rates tend to be at universities that have more robust counseling center staffing. So it's supplemental for them rather than a primary telehealth resource.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Great questions. I think we can keep going.
I'll also just jump in quickly on this one. Much of our work around what we refer to as JEDI, the Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion areas, since June, since the last time you received a more robust update on this particular part of the plan, has really been around Title II and some of our accessibility and some of the areas that we're working with campuses across the system on. So again, Jeff's team really involved quite a bit in this, and also Amy Parker. So Jeff, I'll turn it over to you.
This one's pretty straightforward. So we have a federal compliance deadline for next spring. With Amy Parker's help and the help of Sarah Henry, our Director of Equal Opportunity for the system, we formed a working group in two teams, implementation and communications, and are working to get messaging out to all the universities about how to proceed with this work. Also, with considerable help from Vice Chancellor Lowe and Miriam White, we are moving forward with a Blackboard resource that currently exists at one of our universities that will now be available to all of our universities to support this work. Carolyn, the last thing I would say about this slide is that the overall back office tracking that my staff is now doing for strategic plan goals that fall to us is being housed in an AI dashboard that Heather developed after attending Ryan's class. So you really can't escape the influence of Vice Chancellor Lowe during a board committee meeting. And Trustee Riley, I'm further along than Google Docs, but I'm feeling further and further behind the more I talk to Heather about what she's learning from Ryan. So my curve is needing to expand.
Thank you. Roger, did you have another question? Your hand is up. I want to make sure I don't miss you. Okay, good.
I apologize. No,
No,
I don't.
No need to
Sorry.
apologize. All good.
Sorry.
Any other questions about this sort of progress updates since summer? I think these were really good examples showing different parts of the plan than we reviewed in the summertime and how they were coming along. Any questions or comments from anybody who's here?
I think Trustee Kane, I would just add for those that aren't as involved in the work that while we pulled out a few to offer an example today, we have updated all of them as we go. There's a more comprehensive update available, which I believe we submitted in addition to this packet, but if not, we can certainly get out to folks at any time.
Well, and I think it's also really important to stress that the major jurisdiction of the ongoing work happens in the committees of the board, and that's a very regular conversation. We've seen it on display already multiple times this week, but this committee's job is to get on the balcony of all of that work, which is what we're doing today, which is why we offered that snapshot progress report. So, okay, great. So the next section of this meeting, we want to talk about external and emerging factors that have implications for our plan. And I did some thinking about this and some brainstorming with Jeff and Carolyn, and I came up with my own list that I'm going to put in the chat because that way you can see it, because some people like to see it rather than just me talking at you. Give me 1 second. I'm just making sure you'll be able to read it. Pardon my formatting. There we go. So I came up with 5 external and emerging factors that I think were sort of major and worth raising here. I want to thank Jeff and Carolyn for helping me hone the list a bit. Number one, unshockingly, will be artificial intelligence. There is one reference to AI in the plan. Our working knowledge and collective vocabulary of AI has certainly accelerated in the last 2.5 years, both in its opportunities, its threats, and its understanding of, literally living in our pockets now. It's not just something other people do, it's something that we all are impacted by. Number two, I put the federal shutdown here because I think that is real time impacting our plan. Number three, I put academic innovations, things that have happened that are in the positive for the system, but were not necessarily fully in our vocabulary when we built this plan, including the Your Pace expansion, micro-credentialing, 90 credit programs. And then I put federal executive orders and actions, which also have had an impact in this calendar year on how we envision our work, and certainly were not in our collective crystal ball when we designed this plan. And then finally, evolving priorities of the board. And this is really a partial list, everything from adult learner focus, online education, infrastructure, and deferred maintenance, which isn't reflected in the plan, but the focus we've given it, and then resource allocation decisions. So this was my initial snapshot look as we think about the context in which our plan has been existing and developing. And just want to pause here to open this up for conversation and maybe see, what did I miss, right? What are some other factors or understanding of these different factors that we can discuss here? And I want to acknowledge the fact that a lot of the on the ground impact is happening in other committees. And I recognize it's not a full list, but I got Trustee Moore and then Vice Chancellor / President Franny Mundy.
I think what came up in the retreat as a discussion topic was a senior management transition, and that a lot of contracts expiring in the next 2 to 3 years.
So from an emerging factor. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, John. Yep. Absolutely, writing it down. Yeah. President Franny Mundy.
Thanks. Thanks. And Trustee Kane, you brought this up yourself. The refresh of the state's economic development plan is worth taking a look at, and associated activities in which many of us are involved that have to do with new emphases in R&D and innovation for the state, such as the life sciences and health sciences area, as well as the implications for our role in workforce preparation as the state continues to focus in on new and expanded priorities.
That's great. Thank you. I'm adding it to my list. Chancellor Malloy.
Yeah, clearly we have some challenges that are coming out of Washington beyond the potential cutting of dollars. They have made getting foreign-born or foreign-located students more difficult to bring to our campuses. And that's a real challenge, and not sure it's going to get any better in the next couple of years. So I would put that into the to the collection point, if you would.
Absolutely. That's a good one.
And by the way, we know we were impacted this year to some extent, but I think it's going to, we were smart to tell students not to go home for the summer, which allowed us to keep some more.
Absolutely. Roger.
Thanks. Yeah, thank you. Two things, and one of these has been present the whole time, but maybe it just bears saying again. Maybe the demographic cliff, but the arrival of the demographic cliff, which is starting now, is just an environmental thing we're going to have to keep in mind. And secondly, I don't know whether it fits here, but again, just a background factor we have to continually think about is changing attitudes toward the value proposition of higher ed generally.
Yep. That's great. Thank you. Trustee Alexander, Barbara.
Well, I don't disagree with any of the list here, but I just think that there's all kinds of short-term things and potentially long-term things. Some of them we talked about quite a bit in the development of the strategic plan. Economic development issues, the demographic cliff issue, which was clearly before us even then, and now, as Roger said, more obviously appearing for us. But it might be appropriate to try to organize this list in terms of impacts on revenues to the system and where those impacts are coming.
Mhm.
Impacts on the programs and policies that might require changes to how we do our business.
Mhm.
Those are the two things that I think a strategic plan, I mean, we have all sorts of short-term things. I'm trying to organize this in my head about what we might say about any of those things, because some of them are political and we're not going to make statements about that. And some of them are things that we don't know what impact they will have, but we need to monitor them closely. So economic, revenue-related matters, and structure of what it is we're teaching and how we teach are kind of two things that are big pictures.
So so sort of two buckets, big picture buckets of impact.
Yeah.
Which I just want to repeat back so I can make sure I capture it. That we've got economic sort of and slash revenue impacting, and then program and policy implications for these things. Those sort of the two buckets.
I think so.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I just want to make sure I captured it right. That's great. Trustee Riley, Trista, I saw you had your hand up.
Yeah, I wonder that there's sort of a nuance to the demographic issue, and it's the changing face of students. Not only are there fewer 18-year-olds, there's more adults, more of those people are staying in their dorms and taking things online. So it's really changing kind of the demands on the system, coupled with the lower aspirations. And I think the other piece that wasn't quite as dramatically known to us when we started the plan is some of the failings of K through 12 and the the scores in reading and math. And I think that has a twofold implication for us. One is, will students we already know there's a readiness issue with students. Will they be less ready for college, A? And B, since we educate most of the teachers, does this invite some really creative thinking about how the system addresses working with K through 12 to strengthen some programs and make sure students are as ready as they can be?
Yeah, that's right. And I think what Barbara said is important to go back to, which is, I'd say a sort of federal actions aside, a lot of these things were on our radar screen in some form. And then to use Roger's language, it's like now we're seeing how they're coming to life. And I think that's a good example. I added that K through 12 to the list. Thank you. I have President McDonald and then back to the Chancellor.
Mhm.
I would add labor flexibility to your list. I mean, that's a strategic issue if we're not able to become more flexible in the ways that we teach and the ways that we collaborate. We will continue to have, I think, poor performance on a number of our campuses.
Thank you, President McDonald. I just added that to the list. Chancellor.
Yeah, it's not just numbers, it's who. And we know that we've seen a drop off in the traditional aged male students very substantially. And we're maybe seeing some turnaround in that, but that is a real additional part of the difficulties that we're having.
Yeah. Yep, that's right. Adding that to the list. Other thoughts on this? Thank you. This is a really great conversation about the impacts or people when you have a clarifying conversation about earlier ones that I put up here. I think this is a good conversation. Give it a minute. Did I miss anything in the category of sort of opportunities around the academic innovations that we've got here with Your Pace, micro-credentialing, 90 credit programs? Yes, President Freeney-Mundy. Oh, you're muted.
Yep. I'd like to, in that general category, and it's just kind of reaching a tipping point, the work that we're doing with student success and retention underneath the UMS Transforms activity, particularly in the research learning experiences here at UMaine now, more than 50% of our first-year students are taking advantage of this. So this is a subtopic to retention and many other things, but we can be a system that is known for this kind of engagement in experiential learning and active problem solving and the variety of versions of that we're doing now. And like to get it on the list because it's getting bigger. Yep.
Joan,
Yeah,
did you say
great.
50 or?
50% of the first year students here. I'll check that statistic, but I think that's right.
I think you're right.
Yeah, I'm putting that down as like a addition to 3, right under academic innovations for sure. Efforts of UMS Transforms. Great. It's fun taking notes in front of an audience. It's great. It's not stressful at all. President McDonald, go ahead. Thank you.
It's certainly we need a different relationship with the workforce community, with the people who are hiring our graduates, and the gulf between what goes on in the academic world and what goes on in the employer world are too far apart. They really should be brought together, and we need a different way of imagining how that comes together. Right now, we create our academic programs on the supply side. We create them from the heads of our faculty in terms of what they do and what they bring, which is okay in a certain way, but it's not coming from the demand side. And we have to bring the supply and the demand side together. And so that's going to take a different kind of relationship in how we develop our academic programs in dialogue with the workforce community and maybe the governmental community in terms of what our students need to become great citizens.
That's great. Thank you. Do you mind if I pair that with the focus on state economic priorities and list it with that to say a need for greater connection and alignment with employers?
Oh, I don't mind at all. Does
that sound right to you? I just want to make sure I honor your contribution appropriately.
Absolutely.
Thank you. These are really good. What else have we missed?
Emily, I'll add one thought. I'll agree with Joe, although politely reminding everyone that analysis of workforce need is central to the development of any academic program proposal in our system. Faculty can't bring forward an idea unless they're undertaking an empirical analysis of workforce needs. Beyond that, Joe's dead right from my perspective about aligning what we do and who we are with the labor force in Maine. Thanks to Jen O'Leary's endless influence, I got added this month to a brand new consortium for healthcare and education training, known in short as CHET. I'm on the executive council for this consortium. We had our first meeting last night. The focus, again, healthcare, education, and training, but the central topic of discussion was housing in Maine, because rural and in some cases more urban healthcare organizations and para-healthcare organizations are unable to house traveling nurses, unable to house, in some cases, doctors, unable to house staff at any level in markets that people can't buy into or can't find inventory in. So the need to be responsive as universities, both to labor needs, but also to the broader economic landscape in Maine, I think it's more important for us than ever before. And I got a taste of that in the meeting yesterday.
And I would politely respond to Jeff that there are a lot more programs that we have in place than the ones that we are creating. And so while it is true that the ones we are creating new are going to be looking at workforce, we have a heck of a lot of programs that were created years ago that need this refresh and a different look at how they are interacting with the workforce community.
And Jeff, it of course begs the question, if we could produce more nurses, we wouldn't need traveling nurses who need housing.
I would partly agree with that, Chair Riley, although as you well know from your work, there are some motivations that hospitals have for hiring traveling nurses that stand over and against homegrown nursing graduates from our own system and elsewhere in Maine. But your point is well taken.
Trish, go ahead. Did you have another comment? Oh, your hand went back up. Okay. You're muted and your hand is up. I just want you to know that. Okay, good. This is great. It's a robust list. Also, it's really amazing how much we've both done and how much we're facing from the last 2.5 years. I think it's reflective of the rapid sort of, if AI sets the tone. The reason I put AI on here first is because it also set the tone for how rapidly some of these changes have happened, despite our best prognosticating. Great. If we can always come back to this, but I'm gonna pause the list and we'll make sure this list is captured, either because I'll copy and paste it at the end here, or maybe Beth helped me somehow capture the chat, because I think that probably goes to somebody after this meeting and they can share it, which would be greatly appreciated. So I want to now move into the final section of the meeting. If you have other things you want to add to this list as we go through, please feel free to do that. So in this section of the meeting, we're going to talk about guidance that we want to give as a board, as a committee, the committee on the balcony of the strategic plan, guiding it, and talk through some of the ways that these factors we've just identified and talked about have had an impact on the plan. And I'll turn it over to Jeff and Carolyn to name some of those things, to give us some examples. But I think the kind of guidance that they're looking for, and I'll let them speak for themselves, but as I thought about the kinds of guidance we can offer, it's important to remember that in the original version of the plan, we asked that this plan be budget neutral, that the work that it's done, we said we needed to be budget neutral. And that is, I know that's going to be some of the examples they give today of things that haven't quite fully come to fruition yet or been started, is because they would cost money that is not currently allocated. So options for guidance would be delay or do something later, number one. Number two, fund or do it if funding appears. And number three, set aside or mothball because it's no longer relevant. And I'm going to ask Jeff and Carolyn to give some examples of parts of the plan that require some guidance from us, so we can start this conversation today in this meeting. So Jeff and Carolyn and others, I'll turn it over to you.
I'll share one example, Trustee Kane, and I thank Chair Riley for this example because it really comes from her. She and I have had a couple of conversations over the last year about a goal in the plan that envisions us revitalizing the arts and humanities. And that's an important goal, but until this fall, I had really prioritized other goals for the following reason. So I came to the point this fall where I realized I needed to start working on this goal. I went to the Faculty Governance Council at their first meeting of the year in September, followed that with several conversations with individual faculty, also mentioned this idea of an Arts and Humanities Task Force, which is what the goal in the plan conceives of, at a visit with USM's Senate. And I got the same or similar response from faculty really across the board. If we devote our time to developing a set of recommendations about how we would revitalize the arts and humanities, will there be resources at the end of the line to support whatever changes we're recommending? And very politely, and I hope diplomatically, I reminded them as I gave the presentation that the plan as conceived is a budget neutral plan. But after having several of those conversations, I came back and talked with with the chancellor and with Carolyn and others, and had a chance, I think, briefly to speak with Trustee Cates about this at a recent meeting. And just, here we are. I would welcome delaying the work on this task force if it meant having a year to build some resources into some meaningful, but modest but meaningful pot of money, so that in asking faculty to do this work, we have something to support it on the other end. I agree with the chair and with the other trustees who've asked about this, that we cannot ignore the arts and humanities at this time. I know our own chancellor speaks. Someone mentioned anti-intellectualism in our current culture a few minutes ago. The chancellor's been talking about that since he came here 7 years ago. It was an original theme that I heard him speak on. He's right. So what can we do there? This is an example of an area where we certainly need the board's guidance. We're only on year 3 of a 5-year plan. I have no problem delaying the formation of a task force if it meant that I could find some small resources to offer to faculty in return for developing recommendations that we would then be obligated to work on implementing. That's just one example, Trustee Kane.
Thank you. Trustee Riley, Chair Riley.
My favorite issue. I think there's a difference between training people for jobs and educating people for careers, and we do the latter, and arts and humanities are critical to that and the critical thinking. So I hate to see it wait, but I understand that you don't want to have false promises and not be able to do anything. So I think I'm okay with that. I would caution us though, if we're going to take a serious look at GED, then I don't think we can do that independent of a real review of arts and humanities to make sure they're as robust as they can be, so that we are in fact giving people the breadth of an education to have a lifetime career. So I think the two are related, and we ought to keep that in mind if we're going to advance the GED thing, absent a review of arts and humanities.
I just want to clarify for those who might be watching GED, you're talking about general education requirements.
I'm sorry,
right? Not a GED.
Graduate education, right.
Not a GED itself, but general, using it as a sort of a way of talking about general education requirements on our campus.
And I know there's an urgency to look at the latter, and I think you cannot do it without the former. And I think we'd make a grave mistake if we tried to.
This local music education major agrees with you wholeheartedly.
Yeah, I agree with you too, completely, Chair Riley. And I would also note that faculty are essential to both conversations. So it would be hard to have them separately, and it would be impossible to have them without faculty helping to drive them. So right with you there.
Other thoughts on that one? Jeff, did you want to offer some other examples?
Just one other example that would fit in Emily's final category, which is, are there goals that we should set aside and not work on at all? I offer one that's redundant within our plan, and it's not the fault of anyone, certainly not the person who wrote the plan 3 years ago.
It was you. That was you.
Receiving input till the very last minute from many sources. But trustees, here's an example for you. So we have goals in the plan that speak to high impact practices. That's one category. Experiential learning, that's a second category. Engagement as a third category. And then service learning as a fourth category. As President Freeney-Mundy and others on the screen know, all 4 of those are in current usage are subsumed under the category of the scholarship of engagement, and they all represent variations of the same kind of activity. Our RLEs, which Joe mentioned just a minute ago, are a wonderful example of both a high impact practice and an experiential learning practice. The goal, and we have other examples of engagement across our system already. The service learning goal is one that I propose not working on. It's both an action and a goal within one of the commitments in the plan for 2 reasons. Number one, we already have service learning courses so designated at our universities, and a full complement of service learning activities through the Bodwell Center at UMaine and everywhere else across the system where there's co-curricular activity happening, which is everywhere across the system. But also because the other categories already pick up that category in the plan. Work we've done to advance experiential learning, high impact practices, and engagement already covers the trustees' intention of also doing something meaningful to move service learning forward. So it's just one example, but I offer it because when Heather and I sat down for our latest update on the tracker, we realized that the only goal assigned to academic and student affairs that we have not initiated at all is the service learning goal, because it seemed increasingly to be covered already elsewhere in other goals that we've advanced in the plan. So that's just one category where we would welcome your guidance is, should we even bother, knowing that we've achieved both the spirit and the concrete ends of that goal in other ways. Emily, that's my example. Thank you.
Thank you. Thoughts on that question? Yes, Chair Riley.
Can I ask the terms I'm not all that familiar with. When we talk service learning, do we include internships, the internships in businesses and nonprofits and so forth? And is that a part of this?
So typically service learning is a course that has volunteerism or related activity attached as a component of the course. So it's a course that has a more academic a classroom or in some cases online based curricula, but you're also then doing something to support the community or advance a cause in some way. That's typically service learning. As a category. Experiential learning is typically more defined, although Joan and probably Jason are more the experts here, but experiential learning typically takes you out into an area of research engagement or scholarly activity in fieldwork, practica, experiment station, something of that nature. And then high impact practices is also a relatively general term, but is more than covered both on the research side by the RLEs, and also on the arts and humanities side by work. I mean, you heard President Edmondson talking about her Arts and Humanities in Action group that she's launched at USM, and there are other initiatives elsewhere across the system as well. So, Chair Riley, I hope that's a helpful clarification.
Yeah, I was just wondering if we're doing enough to promote, given the reality of our campuses, it's tough, but promote real live internships in local businesses and.
Thank you. And internships is really a separate category, typically not run directly out of one academic program and sometimes not even run out of academic affairs. Joan, please help me out here.
Yeah, no, you're doing great. I was just going to add a couple of things. The whole concept of research learning is really a parallel of service learning.
Mm-hmm.
The idea that all kinds of learning can take place in these settings, Jeff's described perfectly, service learning. But the concept of research learning is meant to focus on learning to do inquiry, learning to do creative production, learning to help create technologies to solve very specific problems. So it's also comprehensive across our academic disciplines. And then relative to internships, I would also remind another piece of the Alfond project that is quite substantial is the Pathways to Careers effort, which is a system-wide effort to essentially introduce high impact practices. Okay, so now we're going to come bring these together into our internship portfolio, because internships can range in terms of their effectiveness from 0 to very highly useful. And then experiential learning, all of these are versions of experiential learning, and we could make a nice Venn diagram, but not every research learning experience is an experiential learning experience, and similarly vice versa. And so we're working a lot, I think, to try to get clarity, but the good news is all of this is happening at pretty wide scale across the system.
Thank you. Trustee Alexander, go ahead.
Well, the strategic plan should operate at a very high level. And it sounds like we're using words at different words throughout this plan that have very specific academic related implications. And what I'd recommend is that our interest as a plan is to have a set of words that is as broad as possible and that allows the development of implementation of those broad words in all the different areas that have been described here. So if we need to take out some technical words and insert a generic positive or strategic word, I'm all for that.
That's great.
Thank you.
That's great. Sorry, Jeff, go ahead. You were going to say something.
No, just that was really constructive, and I appreciate that. Thank you, Trustee Alexander.
Yeah, and I think that for today, I mean, we're having this meeting today so we can make sure as a committee that is in doing exactly what Barbara just described at what the role of the plan is, that we have a shared understanding of what these factors are, and then sort of what the options will be for us in the coming months as we review the items that the team will bring back to us to say, the option of like delay for funding, fund, or this is not really relevant anymore, right? And I think we just wanted to make sure, and I think I'm adding now to my list a fourth option, which is we need to clean up the language to make it better and understandable as a fourth action, a sort of a fourth level of impact and guidance that we can provide them based on Trustee Alexander's comment, which I think is great. Jeff or Kim, were there other examples you wanted to offer today?
I had an example, but I'm not sure if Trustee Alexander has another question.
Oh, sorry. I see your hand is up. I do see that now. Sorry. Did I miss you?
Let's
Go
do
ahead.
the examples because then I have a bigger question to raise. Go ahead.
Great.
And mine can be fairly brief because we have talked about it before, but the example that I had is really one that is the same sort of idea, but it's, do we reframe, revise, or do we actually attempt to fund? And it's really around some of those JEDI that we just talked about, or the places to work elements, and a lot around the DEI. Obviously, with things that have happened on the federal front, we've had to reframe some of how we were talking about and working around some of those goals. Also changing the focus to be a bit more now towards the Title II and the accessibility. So we've had some great work in the last few months in that area that Jeff just touched on. But the other piece, again, to sort of, do we look at it in a slightly different light, is we had a couple of in there that talked about us, the role that we have as a system in bringing citizens together, communities together, to try and be a convener of ideas, and how we help inform the citizens. And do we, because it feels to me that it's getting harder and harder for groups of people to come together and have these types of, informed and healthy, positive discussions, do we shift our focus a bit so that we start to do that more, trying to bring together people more to have great discussions about civic engagement and engage the public more with us as institutions, which will also help them better understand the role of Maine's public universities. So I think there's things that we can shift slightly from our focus from what we had hoped to do, and we can reframe it a bit so that we can serve more what the public might need in the next year or two versus what we thought they were going to need when we wrote this plan. So those are a couple of the areas that we're looking at, how we perhaps make a bit larger. Do we do it with or without funding, but reframing and refocusing those efforts.
How do people feel about that concept of reframing and refocusing some of the items of the plan that have been impacted by changes? Trustee Alexander, go ahead.
Well, I'm trying to be careful.
You're doing great.
I don't think we should reform anything in response to executive orders that are not the law of our state or the land. So that's, as far as diplomacy with respect to certain kinds of activities that happen pursuant to our plan, I delegate to the system. But I don't want to make changes to this plan on those grounds. But I do think, turning to what I think is there's a whole set of things I think we can make that are relatively cleaning up language. Maybe because of feedback, there's a specific proposal in this plan or commitment that we want to change because of very good reasons as has been explored here. And so I'm all for doing that, and a group of people can go off and do some work and bring those back to us. But as far as there are some things in this plan that I think the board, and this is not something that I know we're not going to do just in this committee, but there are aspects of the board's discussions and ongoing development of policies and programs that might change some very specific requirements of the strategic plan. For example, our plan calls for each of our universities to balance their own budgets. I think that's an issue that the board wants to think about a little bit more as a generic discussion, as a longer term view about how we set priorities, how we integrate some of the activities going on, how we might help or transfer resources or whatever. I'm just saying that as far as I'm concerned, those big picture things probably need to be set aside for this discussion and focus at this point on cleaning up the plan, making minor changes, and reflecting our actual experience with these particular with the language we used and the specific commitments we made. But I think in the long run, there's lots of interesting discussions we're going to have from the board's perspective about policies and programs. And I would just set aside those at this point. And I ask others if they think that that distinction makes sense for the near-term action of the committee.
I'll say thank you, Trustee Alexander. It's really helpful. I will say that I think that what you said is exactly true and makes sense about sort of the board priority conversation that we're having, we're engaging in. And the way it reflects in real time in this review process is in that category of things we can or cannot do because of adequate funding, which would link back to this question of the balanced budget question, right? So I think we're going to get some feedback to help inform that broader conversation as part of this review, as we get things back that say, we'd love to do this, but we can't do this. And the reason we can't do this is because the guidance is, balanced budgets with no reserves. I think it'll be a helpful bit of information to inform that, right? This sort of look at what we can't do because of funding or because of inadequate funding at the time. And I think those things are related and support each other. I hope.
Well, there's a short-term thing and then there's a long-term thing
Yes.
in terms of discussions and the venue within which those discussions occur. That's all I was making.
Yeah.
And so this committee could very well, as you pointed out, have some very interesting input into the bigger discussion that's to come. Very good.
That's what I was trying to say. Yeah, is we'll have some interesting stories to tell potentially out of this review that can help inform that broader board level conversation for sure.
Go ahead. All this progress raises a question for me, and I almost dare not ask it.
I think I know what you're going to say.
But we've got 2 more years and so much has been completed and so much progress has been made. Is it time to sort of move up a development of the next strategic plan and begin that earlier than 2 years? I just watch Jeff faint.
No, I was just thinking about changing my name and moving to Canada, Chair Riley.
Chair Riley, I will say I've been thinking about that too, and I actually think what's important, maybe we could give some more things to Chancellor Lowe to do because he obviously crushed his column, but in the other columns, those high numbers reflect not all necessarily completed, right? They reflect ongoing, or they reflect things that are in progress. So our numbers are good and they are improving with every month, which is really important, but it's not because everything is done, right? And it's not just unified accreditation with the 2027 deadline that is putting us there. But that's something we can also continue to look at as we go through. And I also will say a strategic plan does capture a moment in time and an understanding of where you think you're going in the next 3 to 5 years, but it's not a limiting document, right? Nothing to say the board can't do additional strategic things beyond the strategic plan. And maybe we'd be even better positioned to do them because of this work. But we definitely want to think about staff and team level capacity before we embark on a new plan.
It strikes me that it may be more of an iterative process than a whole new strategic plan. We hadn't done a strategic plan for how many years?
19 years.
So now we have this incredible system and Carolyn's matrices and Jeff's matrix, we have a system. So maybe it's a different kind of planning process and it's more ongoing anyway,
it's an interesting thought, and I think an example of how that manifested itself post-strategic plan is actually the AI task force, right? Because that was something that we only nominally sort of hit on in the initial strategic plan. We identified it as an area we had to tackle, created a structure for that conversation, and now we're seeing it bear fruit for everybody's benefit. So I think that we have some already in place, some good models of how to stay innovative, to use President Franny Mundy's language from earlier, that adding that innovation into how we think about our work and strategy as a board is good.
I think I would add to Chair Riley that I do think I understand the thought process for how you're thinking about it moving forward. And I think having gone through the process to create what we did, having not had one for so long was a good process. But these last 2 years have been a great sort of education on what should it look like next, because it likely wouldn't look like this same type of a framework or the way that we have structured it with this many and living document in the next version. So I think this refresh that Emily has described and we've talked about today is a really good first step in let's refresh what we have, and then what does it need to look like in the 2 years when this is completing. So I think that does make sense as we're refreshing to think about what comes next.
Yeah. Thank you, Carolyn. Other thoughts for today about guidance, strategy, questions about elements of the plan, additional factors you've thought of since 30 minutes ago that you want to add to the list? And again, again, this is like sort of a midpoint conversation for us, so that as the team goes off to do this work and bring it back to us, we've given them proactive guidance, and we're not just reacting to a set of changes that have been made later. Chancellor, go ahead. Oh, you are muted. I don't know who is the host of this meeting. Maybe someone can unmute the chancellor. He is not. You are stuck on mute. That's my definition of a terrible day. All right. If he can get himself unmuted, we will come back here.
Beth, are you able to do that?
I think it's his.
I can go on and ask him to unmute.
Yeah, try that. Let's try that.
I went to the other.
There you are. I
Okay.
see. All right, perfect. Now we've got you on the other phone. Perfect. Thank you.
All right. Sorry about that. It just wouldn't let me in. So can you hear me now?
We can.
Yeah.
You know, I was reflecting on Trish's comments on Gen Ed. I wonder whether we don't owe it to ourselves to find out whether we're having the impact that we thought we were.
Can you
And I
say
don't know
more
whether
about that?
that's I don't know whether that's interviews with faculty, with students, with employers. You know, I like Gen Ed, but I wonder whether we're offering courses that are actually having the impact that we think they are, and perhaps we need to test ourselves at some point.
Is it still the right and relevant course sequence?
That's exactly
things
it.
like that. Yeah, yeah.
Do we know? I'm curious, and it would probably be the purview more of the ASA committee than this committee, but I'm also on that committee, so I don't mind asking the question, which is, do we know when was the last time there was a review? Because I know that's also very faculty engaged process.
Yeah, so I'm not aware of any system-wide
No.
review of Gen Ed. Gen Ed is
Right.
typically reviewed by the individual universities as
Right.
the faculties are updating their Gen Ed.
Yeah. Do we know the time frame that's happened? I do know it's campus based, but I was just curious if we know when.
So UMaine has just underwent a rigorous updating of their Gen Ed. Presque Isle went through it several years ago. I think Machias William, not too long ago.
Well, we are now aligned with UMaine. As we're part of UMaine, we have the same Gen Ed.
Can I
So
just,
I would just say in general, the Gen Ed is reviewed on each campus, within every 10 years, just like any normal program,
Great.
usually a 5 to 10 year window.
I just couldn't remember. President McDonald.
So when you look at Gen Ed, it's not just one size fits all. What we have at Farmington is what many universities have, and that's just a menu of areas. You have to take a course in art, you have to take a course in English, you have to take a course in math and science. And so it's just a set of requirements that way. But you can also have Gen Ed organized around skills. And so you can say, we want critical thinking, we want leadership, we want collaboration, we want different skills, and you can create Gen Ed that way. The third way that you can create Gen Ed is to have it on themes. And so you can have interdisciplinary themes come together and look at something like climate change and to have science and political science and English all looking at that. And then the one way that we are looking at it now is trying to embed it into some of the majors. So we're saying, right, how would you embed the gen ed courses into education? How would you embed them into business? So there are multiple ways to look at gen ed that would, I think, make it more palatable to students, because right now it's just take all these courses in different areas. Many of them feel as if, well, we had that in high school, and you're just requiring us to do something that we really don't want to do. So there are different ways to achieve the same objective.
Thank you for that perspective. That's helpful. And I see Jason's got his hand up too.
Just kind of reflecting on the string, I wonder if gen ed or the research learning experiences are places where AI literacy or proficiency could be explored.
Yeah, I see a lot of head nodding for sure. Roger. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, looking at the environment in which you're in, I'm going to incur the wrath of the Chair Riley by even raising this issue. But we're also learning that employers are not necessarily as impressed as they used to be by that piece of paper called a diploma, and they want to be seeing skills and certificates and badges and things of that nature rather than a diploma. I'm the product of liberal arts education. I feel it made me a much better person, so I am not an advocate for what I'm about to say. But it seems to me that the discussion of gen ed should begin with the question of, is gen ed still a relevant part of every student's college education? I personally would answer that question yes, but I think here in 2025, we need to be asking it again.
Yeah, and I would go back to the Chancellor is correct, because when you said evaluate the impact of gen ed makes sense, but what is what impact does gen ed have, which I was calling the wrong thing, have? I mean, how do you measure the impact of general education? It's just an intriguing question of a history class or
I'm confident there's national research we could pull from that. I know there is on sort of the how you evaluate that kind of thing. And we could certainly, again, find the right place for that conversation for sure. Professor Otto.
I'll point out that when we did the block transfer agreement, one of the starting places that we did was what are the value initiatives. So it's the valid assessment of learning in undergraduate education, which is an AACU. You have your essential learning outcomes, so that across all campuses, we had many of the same learning outcomes. And then we have different ways of approaching how we achieve those outcomes. And so there are standard outcomes that are recognized that this is what general education should incorporate. And different campuses implement it differently. There's different stages of assessment at each campus. So we do have our own flavor, but the underpinning is really the same of what those outcomes are.
That's great. And I think, I think there's also probably literature out there about what gen ed, how it has evolved. And I think as keeping my strategic planning hat on, I think I would say that conversation also should be not just about whether it's meeting the needs of now, but what we can do to anticipate the needs of going forward, right? Of the state of Maine, 5 years, 10 years and longer down the line. And thank you, Professor Otto, for putting, I knew you'd have something right there for me. Thank you so much. From the AACU valid assessment of learning. You put a link in the chat, which we'll make sure everybody gets. Thank you so much. Chancellor, did you want to say anything else on this, since you sort of raised this flare and now had this conversation?
Well, I think I think gen ed is a good thing if it's being applied properly, and if we're requiring the things that need to be required, or options that need to be considered by students and our own part to make a selection between, you know, 3 different things. I just, we keep talking about gen ed. It is important. You know, I was a sociology and political science major, but I also wonder whether we respond swiftly enough in what should be required in gen ed. You know, I could throw out AI, for instance. Are we making sure that we're preparing people for that tool that apparently cost 14,000 jobs at Amazon? I just think that we have to be on our toes to make sure that we're supplying, if we're going to require courses, that we're introducing people to courses that have real impact. And perhaps we need to ask students whether they felt that they are people who've been out of school for 3 or 4 years, whether they've been impacted to the extent that we have become comfortable with in believing, and I do believe, but are we doing it the right way? Are we delivering it the right way? Are we giving the right options for exploration? That's what I'm trying to.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. It's really helpful.
Sorry to prolong the argument.
No, I think it's great. And look, I think the point of today was to have a conversation about all these questions we're thinking about, the factors we're facing, so that the team has as much information and perspective from this committee and its constituencies as we look at the strategic plan before us. And, you know, part of that will inevitably be identifying areas we can apply innovation before we embark on another strategic plan initiative.
Emily, 2 very quick comments. Number
yes.
1, in response to Jason, we have had conversations and with the presidents and the vice chancellors, and certainly Ryan's been influential and instrumental in those conversations around AI in relationship to gen ed. The chancellor asked for those conversations during a senior staff retreat last June, and they've been ongoing since then. So that's very much in the air and in the works right now. Secondly, for the trustees' benefit, the enrollment patterns and student interaction with our 90 credit programs once underway will be hugely instructive, because you will continue to see a mix of courses in the major, in general education, and electives, but each truncated to fit a 90 credit frame. And how students respond to that in terms of enrolling and what their experience is moving through those programs, and then what their experience is in the job market, is going to teach us volumes about general education in the modern era, and how best to be responsive to it.
It's great. Thank you. It feels like this conversation is cadencing, but I want to make sure that if others have things they want to raise in any of the categories we've covered in the meeting today, that we make space for that before we end the meeting. Chancellor Lowe. Vice Chancellor Lowe, excuse me.
I was just going to mention this, just to wrap up that last conversation, a reminder that at the last meeting, we talked a little bit about the Chancellor's year-end investment plan. We mostly focused on the demolition piece. Another component of that is 400,000 specifically for faculty, for our campuses, to focus AI and gen ed together, and just finalizing the details of that. And then that will go out to all the campuses soon. So that's just another piece to layer on that.
It's a great reminder and really good and exciting. I'm excited to see what happens with that. Thank you. Any other thoughts before we bring this meeting to a close? This has been a great conversation. Well, I will just say thank you to everybody for your participation today. This was very thoughtful. I think we did provide, some guidance and direction, also built a pretty good shared understanding, of where we've been and where we are, and hopefully where we're headed. So what happens next is now into the spring, the team will work to build on the guidance in this meeting, going through the plan and bring us back those recommended changes. And at our next meeting, we will review those recommendations for changes and then send any recommendations we do have to the full board for approval and discussion. So Jeff or Carolyn, since you helped design this meeting, I wanted to see, did I miss anything in my summary?
No, I think it was great.
No.
Awesome. Well, with that, thank you all. There's been a lot of meetings today, a lot of time looking at each other in small screens. You all look great. And enjoy the rest of this hopefully very sunny day where you are too. Thank you very much. And Beth, can we save the chat? That's what I want to make sure. Okay, you've got it. Okay, amazing. Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.